I suggested that we maybe use that recent blog post of yours, Luke, as a bit of a starting point about salvation. I think, as you probably both already know, I'm really curious about coming from a psychotherapy point of view. What is it that we are doing? What is it that we are clearing out, or what is it that we are trying to help a person to reconnect with? What is it that happens on the other side of doing some of that work? Because it seems like there's a huge gap there. There's a huge hole there around the meaning that a person makes on the other side of that process about what they're supposed to do next, or even the meaning that is made around the transformative process itself. Like, what was that? How did that happen? Where did that come from? And so all of that is always bubbling away in my mind. And I've been reading a little more about Gurdjieff on the back of our last conversation, Luke, and finding, again, lots of interesting ways that his thought, and then sort of the way that Davenloo was operating and what made Davenloo's ISTDP technique different to what was already out there at the time. Just some interesting overlaps in all of that and how I've been thinking about it. But I might just be quiet for a little while and just see what springs to mind. I know, Nick, that I sent you the link to the blog post as well. So I'll just leave it in the space for whatever jumps out.
Yeah, I had not. I mean, I heard we had talked about it a little bit in our conversation, Aspacia, just the name. I hadn't done a ton of research on Gurdjieff, but it was very cool to. I think resonated with some of the other teachers and writers from especially early Christianity, that I had been exposed to, fortunately, kind of a lot of the Eastern Orthodox fathers and different things like that I think present quite a different vision of the human person and what salvation and healing are. And so it was a lot of those themes have been, as I've reconnected with some of those authors, weirdly in the last couple, like probably 2 weeks. So it was just pretty funny to see, and synchronous to have that come up and oh yeah, this is what was so cool and drew me. But yeah, I'd love to hear, Luke. I mean, I don't have a ton of exposure beyond that, like how that blog post came to be and how that follows your own personal kind of journey, or however that lands.
Yeah. Well, there's this, there's always been this question there for me, right from when I was a child. I wanted to know the why of things. I wasn't content with just being served up whatever, right? Which got me into lots of trouble. But I see now that it's in one sense kind of served me well.
Yeah.
Because it really comes down to this question of purpose. Why are we here for? I mean, that's a very big question that everybody tries to avoid as much as humanly possible, because it's exceptionally uncomfortable. But also, if you ratchet it down to why do we need to heal? And if you ratchet that down to why do we need the type of work, the therapy, in order for us to become something other than what we currently are. And the question of purpose, the question of why, the question of, why even attempt this, is quite important, because there are many reasons why not to. Like for example, I don't know if you're a parent, Nick. I know I am, and Aspacia are, but there's this question of why bring children into the world if they're just going to die. I mean, that seems to be a fairly bleak question, but it was one of the questions I had, why get married, or all of those sorts of things. And it really kind of I had this real sense that I really wanted children. There was a time in my life that I didn't, but I really, and I wasn't sure why. But there was this nagging question around, well, there is something here that is incredibly important, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But if our only purpose is just to die, then technically every parent is a murderer, because you're bringing children into the world knowing that they're just going to die. But I'm sure most parents don't kind of operate like that.
Sure.
And it's the same with healing. Why do I need to heal? Why do I feel this sense of there's something in me that's not quite right, and I also can't put my finger on it. But I also can't see it. What prevents me from seeing my whatever it is in order to move in another way? And then, of course, that sort of naturally leads on to this question of being saved, and all kind of religions have this in some way, shape, or form. But what am I being saved from? What am I being saved for? And so this question of purpose, this question of why is one of those big kind of white elephants that seems to be traipsing the online world, and everyone conveniently skips around it. Talks very kind of cleverly around a whole bunch of other things, the global crisis, the meaning crisis, all of these sorts of things. It really doesn't ask the questions, what are human beings for? Like, there seems to be a purpose in everything else, or at least some kind of intent, aim, whatever that might be, and yet we don't apply that to human beings. Or if we do, we apply it at some kind of lower level that's comfortable. The purpose of human life is to be happy, or to love, or you go, okay. Or to be enlightened, or to, okay. But what's that for? Right. So there's this, okay. So healing, or the process of undergoing some kind of ability to transform oneself, without a sense, or a clearer sense, or a growing sense of purpose of that, or why am I doing that, will very quickly come up against a barrier. So if the purpose for my healing, the therapy, the work that I'm trying to undergo, is just to feel good,
right,
that's where it stops. And maybe feeling good isn't always a good thing. Maybe that, there's some question marks around that. Okay. So the whole that I see, particularly in the conversations I see online, because of the trepidation to not kind of go there, is what is all this for? Is merely me wanting to make myself more whole, and I'll just put it like that, an egotistical thing. I just want to feel great. I just want to, whatever it is. Or is there something else that is preparation for? So this whole kind of question I see ends up being bigger and bigger and bigger. But the tendency in the modern world is to reduce it and reduce it and reduce it until suddenly healing becomes a technique. It becomes a model. It becomes a framework. And, there's thousands and millions of those things, and everyone tends to follow one thing or the other. But if you begin to ratchet it up a little bit, and Gurdjieff speaks about this, the patristic fathers speak about it. Certainly the Bible speaks about it. And I've touched on it in that blog. But what is, I think, scary for most people, that the biblical authors, and particularly Christ and also Gurdjieff, give our purpose a very high aim. It is a high bar, and that scares people, right? As it should. It's very humbling. It's like, I'm supposed to be like this, and I'm so far away from that. But yet, in a sense, having a feeling of being so far away from that can bring you closer towards it. And that's not a rational thing. right? That's not rational.
Yeah.
And so we've got this highly intellectual culture which tries to rationalize, explain everything away, and yet solves nothing. Because there's this dimension that we completely miss because we think it's kind of nonsense, what we would call feeling or being, this sense of something else, because we've reduced everything. Just as an example, I can remember reading William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience. I'm not quite sure if you've read it, as well as other authors about 100 or so years ago. And it was just interesting the way that they used to talk about psychology, which is really, in its original sense, the study of the soul or study of the spirit, in the Greek. And they used to talk about kind of consciousness and soul and spirit, all of these sorts of things. And then gradually over time that was reduced to mind and mind alone. And then over time that was reduced to a brain. And now we talk about neurons and neuroscience, and like we just reduce the human being to chemistry.
Dopamine.
Yeah.
Right.
We talk about dopamine. We talk about, it's just easier to talk like that because it removes us.
Yeah.
But the stuff that really makes us human, which makes us squirm and turn upside down and, curl up into the fetal kind of posture and just cry your eyes out, all of those sorts of things are things that we are rationally trying to move away from.
Yeah.
And then we avoid at all costs, and even go to the extent to try to make the pathology framework around all of these experiences, that if you're not cool, calm, rational, being able to string some logical words and sound clever, then somehow you're abnormal. But that just breeds very kind of humans who lack a human quality. We reduce ourselves to robots. We reduce ourselves to algorithms. So this, for me, this question of purpose and how I kind of put it in the blog is an attempt to reopen that all of the symptoms, the whole need for the whole mental health industry and everything else is because we refuse, avoid, unconsciously or not, this question, what is the purpose of human life and my life in particular? Not in terms of a human social construct, but perhaps human life is part of a much greater function, and we have a role to play. We've just forgotten what that role might be. So that kind of, in a nutshell, is probably one of the most uncomfortable questions, but I think a question that needs to be breathed through for those who are game. Anyway, I might leave it there. So
Something's coming to mind for me, Nick. If I jump in for a sec? So part of what I find helpful about the more psychoanalytic approach, as opposed to something like a clinical psychology, is that there is some emphasis, obviously, on the unconscious and the emotional, and the idea of sort of the unconscious emotional blockages and anxiety and all of these things. It feels, I think what attracted me to it is that it feels that it's moving more towards this kind of direction, that it's not, that there is more at play here. But see, even within ISTDP, these are some of the barriers that I sort of feel that I come up against. And when I was reading the blog post, Luke, I wrote down, I love that you wrote, the fundamental human problem is not that we are morally deficient, it is that we are asleep. And that really spoke to me as capturing part of, I guess, the struggle I'm up against currently in the work, is that, the morally deficient, there's a lot of emphasis on things like unconscious guilt, if we start there. And that is helpful, that's useful. And I think there is a working through when we pay attention to those sorts of things. that is helpful, but it only gets part of the way to something. And so this idea that we are asleep, we are more fundamentally asleep in our ways of knowing, our sort of access to other forms of non-verbal knowing, if we call it that. That has just been my intuitive sense, not just in the work I do, I think just in life in general. And so that starts to shift more into the territory that I'm really interested in and what that sort of speaks about. It's more like this entire awakening. And what I do like about ISTDP as a model, I will say, is that there is a real emphasis on sort of intensity of feeling. And it does go beyond, unconscious guilt, and it's all the emotions. And, I see more and more too, just how defended we all really are against what we might call to the positive emotions, to feelings of love and tender feelings and all these things as well. So it moves, there is like a fullness of emotional experience that I really value about it, that really sort of helps the person, I think, to sort of become more alive in their connection to emotions. But, I've talked about this before. Beyond that, there are these sort of felt senses. There are these, I think the way that you talk about it, Luke, and the Gurdjieff way is sort of these higher felt senses or experiences, these higher feeling states. That sort of stuff is starting to move more into the realm, though, of, outside of what is captured in the theory of ISTDP or psychoanalysis, or, this is starting to get into. But it's so apparent, and it is so apparent when you work with another human being in such an intense way. It is so apparent that is part of what gets opened up too. There is all this other stuff, is the best way I can say it. There are these other ways of knowing that are nonverbal, that are beyond just emotions. And that is the bit that I'm left with, well, what does that tell us? And so, I just wanted to throw that in there, because there are forms of, types of psychotherapy that I think kind of move us in that direction. And then there is this kind of gap, this kind of opening into something else, that just from my experience is undeniable, that there is more there. I won't go beyond that with reading out my quotes, otherwise I'll read out the whole blog post. But I will.
No, that was wonderful. I just wanted to pick up on one point, and it's great you zeroed in on that quote, because for Gurdjieff, and certainly my own experience, seems to center around, why can't I see? I mean, it's a very practical thing. And I found that while trying to express something of that and talking through things with people and trying things can be helpful, it still does not allow us seeing directly in the moment of when it actions itself in my being. Normally, there's a seeing, or really a memory, not truly a seeing, but a memory after. So something happens, and then I talk about it, and then I go, oh, okay, yeah, I felt like this. But Gurdjieff was very much, no, I need to find a way to see in the moment. Without the need to talk or judge. But so his question, and really the emphasis around what he taught, was this seeing, this faculty of attention, which he defines in a certain way, that this sleep, which is a real quality of energy in us, or a lack thereof, prevents us from seeing in real time. And that gap for him was that needed to be closed. So how can I see in the moment of when I'm angry, upset, all of those sorts of things, when all of this emotional high rate, all of these energies are moving through me, in me, well as from outside? How do I stand in the middle of that, like an eye in the storm, and just see? And that is incredibly difficult. So it's nepsis for the patristic fathers. It's this, how do I have this quiet amongst the chaos so that I can begin to see things that I can't see if it's just from a memory that I talk about afterwards. And so then for Gurdjieff, you very much get into this notion of energies and forces acting on you in each moment. And that's when it starts to get a bit more of the esoteric, the mystical kind of sense, which I don't think you can avoid. You just can't. Anyway, sorry.
That's what I've been finding. That's what I've been finding. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially getting to our last conversation too, Aspacia, like those become harder and harder, I think, to avoid those realities. The more you help somebody to clear out some of the debris that maybe has been contributing to their lack of sight. It becomes, and maybe you can access it, at other times as well, even while the debris is there and you're in the middle of it. And once you start to clear it out, it becomes more and more apparent of like, yeah, what the hell are we doing here? Where is this going, and why clear this away, for what sake? And now that I have, what's to stop me from just piling it back on again? Because there's not a lot of direction. And I do think that was always, at least in its healthiest forms, the role of religion was to, I think, give that sense of ontological direction that is much more sustaining. And I think that's something that is fascinating, both in my own personal story and like coming back, I told you in these last couple of weeks, to some of these authors, is I can remember reading these and having a profound effect on my life. And years later, now it's like, I've forgotten it. And coming back to it, there's still so much new insight. There's still so much, I think, what captivates me, I think, a lot about Western Christianity was what I was raised in, but is how much the ground of, the whole storyline was on a moral, penal substitutionary atonement stuff that, like, that's not a very benevolent or purposeful universe. And you can't, it's very hard to heal somebody in that type of framework, because I think you come up against, okay, well, if it's just because of that, like, great, we did it. Like I've done the sacraments, I've prayed the prayers, like I'm there, right? There's not a whole lot of impetus for, oh no, you're supposed to participate in this, this divinization process, or, however they wanted to frame it. And I think we've, really for a long, long time, that's not been a part of the Western culture at all.
Yeah, it seems to have, and certainly I, grew up in the church as well. It becomes, and I'll also, no offense, also say this about the mental health industry and any other industry I've been involved with. It becomes very much more of a legal kind of framework. It's a checkbox. It's compliance. It's, long as you do these things, then assume everything's going to be okay. And the mystical and the esoteric element says, no, it's not. There are no guarantees. Every moment is a new moment. And in a sense, faith comes from a sense that there's something that I need to do because I have the capacities, and then there is something that I can't, but yet it's needed. And so there's this kind of paradox, which I kind of call the help kind of paradox. You might know that you need help, and that kind of by itself is a big thing, to acknowledge that you need help.
Yeah.
And then there's even a bigger thing to seek it. And then there's a bigger thing to be open to it and receive what that help is. So there's a number of big steps along the way. And, if you look in the Christian faith, what's the first thing that Christ says? Repent, right? Metanoia, okay? Which in really modern English is not just change your mind, which is normally how that's translated.
Yeah.
It means to transform. So before I can believe or receive or accept, there's a whole bunch of other things that I need to do to prepare the way. And that's kind of lost. You look at the modern churches, or if you really look at any kind of mainstream exoteric kind of religion, it's still a bit of a, and I'm not trying to demean it, but it very much comes across as a tick the boxes. But yet, we all know that there's something insufficient there. So Gurdjieff really put this in more terms of kind of energies and forces. So to forgive, for example, is not a moral implication. That might be a side effect, but it's more of an energetic one. That there is something in me that is stuck, identified, attached, that causes a blockage. And, it's interesting you use that word, kind of blockage, kind of debris. These are sort of very much energetic terms.
Yeah.
Yet this effort to forgive is quite a mysterious one, which literally means to give in advance. So I give a part of myself, I throw it into the future for the sake of a future state or a future self, right? I sacrifice, which is not really means to give up, but to make holy. And so when seen from that point of view, rather than a moral implication that I need this for my body, I need this for my life, it takes on a bit of a different sense, and then comes back to, well, okay, what are the ingredients there? What are the things that I need to see to even make this possible? And I know in my own experience, I've wanted to forgive someone, particularly myself.
Yeah.
And I just come up against something, right?
Yeah.
Constantly, because I was approaching it in a certain way, the way that we're kind of told to. Just forgive.
Right.
I can't do that.
What does that even mean?
It's just,
right?
that's nuts.
Yeah.
But yet that moment when you can, right, when you're able to, is very different. It happens instantaneously, and not only does it change your future, but it changes your past. It changes your whole relationship to life. And that's not anything you can put in a textbook. It comes from human being to human being. It comes from, having a moment of sight where I see what's needed as the only thing that's needed. Yeah. And yet it takes so much to come to that point. So this idea, and certainly Gurdjieff says this, is you've got to start way further back. The whole kind of belief thing, that's like the apex, We can't do it now. Or if we do it, it's so blind, capricious, that it leads to all sorts of craziness. So there's this preparation that starts a long way back. And that's where, in one sense, it's the therapeutic healing kind of process is an enabler towards that. But if that is cut off from its teleological, ends, the purpose of human life, then it stops short. And at least in my experience, I don't know what yours is like, that however far you come, if you can't keep going, you slide back. It's inevitable. You return to where you were. And not only is that not just a return to normal, it's a return to something worse, because you have seen how far you've been from that place. And it's kind of like your own hell, right? So it's this very interesting, Bible talks about it. Gurdjieff talks about it. He always talks about, before going on any journey of healing, or however you want to call it, make sure you assess yourself very well. Make sure that you understand that this is for a lifetime, and that you seek the very end of it, because to stop halfway won't mean it'll be halfway. It'll mean you'll slide right back to the beginning.
So in his assessing yourself is also this looking forward to, you're assessing yourself for the purpose of, you're going to go through this process, but what for?
Yeah. And it's like, it's this kind of metaphor of a journey, or, going on a trip. What's the first thing you ask when you say, hey, I'm going to go on a trip? Where you going to?
Where are you going?
Yeah. You may never have been there. You might kind of Google it, but at the end of the day, you don't really know what you're in for. But you have a bit of a sense of that's where I need to go. You're not quite sure of the journey. You need to pack supplies and have some money, and maybe make sure you go with people who've been there, or at least are also wanting to enjoy the trip. But to say you're going on a trip and not knowing where you're going, how you're going to get there, and have absolutely no kind of resources to do it, normally ends in tragedy. And that's sort of what
someone told you it was a good idea, though.
Yeah, it was a good idea. And I see this a great deal, particularly in the more of the, what I call the spiritual kind of drug scene. And I've done a lot of that myself, but you see, it's like, we're going to go on a trip. Yeah, but what's it for?
Yeah, why?
Why? Why, do you have a sense of what might be around the corner with you? Are you prepared enough for it? These things are thrown out the window, and it's all for, trying to storm the gates of heaven and meet God and all of these sorts of things. And I've seen that just be absolutely tragic. So this sense, anyway, of preparation, rather than the therapeutic process or a journey, but essentially what I'm trying is to prepare the way for something else to enter that can be of real help, is lost in our modern culture, because it's just caught up, as you were saying, it just caught up in so much baggage.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, the things that are coming to my mind right now are first with kind of ISTDP, and there's a focus on coming up with a goal. Like, what is your goal? A very big focus, I think, on the person's goal for therapy that's not as present in, let's say, psychoanalytic or other derivatives, where it's like, the process is the process, right? Like, you're just here to learn more about yourself, and this can be a never-ending process and analysis or whatever. And right, part of that, great, like that is the case. Like, you're going to be on this journey for lifelong, and but I do think there's something, and in my own foot in both camps, doing some work in ISTDP and also having, I think, a lot of psychoanalytic background, and it is where do you fall with certain patients, but also like with yourself, of what am I doing here and why? And if we don't have a clear agreement together on what this is for, who's to stop this from going forever and ever and ever? Or who's to say, like, you get your symptom reduced and then you go on and then it doesn't just pop up somewhere else, right? Like, that, I think, was the brilliance of, I think, the psychoanalytic stuff was like, never, symptom is never a face value thing. Like, this is always a byproduct of something. And our, modern psychotherapy, pharmaceuticals, all of that is, let's just treat this thing. And, it is legalistic. It is like, that's it, it's done, like, you've got the thing and you should be fine,
Just cut it out, Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, let's, cut out the cancer of this, and it doesn't work, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's something too around the, even as therapists, this goes back to the same thing, but also not necessarily being prepared for some of these questions that may arise on the other side too, and all of this that can happen along the way. We talk a lot about informed consent and all of these things, but it's difficult. It's difficult for someone to know exactly what it is that they are signing up for in these realms. And I just think of therapy of this kind is a very strange in-between space like that, you know, and obviously there's this real kind of attempt to apply, you know, the medical model and all of these, not just the medical model, but the scientific and the, you know, and all the same sorts of regulations as all these other, you know, institutions and professions going on out in the world. But there's something strange. It's like a middle space. There is something different about it. And I think, yeah, it is interesting too, Luke, you pointed out the way that the language that Nick and I might use around debris and blockages and things. That's part of what I found so interesting about this overlap is that for Davenlu there is, he also talks about like crystallization and like a lot of words that I see in your writing that I'm assuming may be Gurdjieffian in nature. And I do think that Gurdjieff's emphasis on energy, there is something about it that also feels like it's filling in a gap or gives me actually better language to talk about some of this, which I've really appreciated. And, you know, I think, what was the phrase here? You wrote, I don't know if this is Gurdjieffian or not, Luke, or this is just from your own pen, but you wrote, "We inherit a perceptual catastrophe." And that's so elegant because, you know, the ways that we try to talk about, you know, with a client, we try to talk about essentially what you might be able to label in sort of some modern psychotherapy speak as effects of attachment trauma, you know, like trying to talk about what are all these sorts of perceptual delusions or layers or, you know, that have formed over time in these automatic habits and patterns of the way that your perceptual system is being interpreted and the way that you then interact with people in relationships. And if we really slow it down and take a look at how that built up and maybe there's stuff happening underneath, and we could undo some of that and you might actually see and operate in the world differently as a result. It's just all this other language to kind of talk about a similar set of things. I've been thinking a lot anyway, in short, about what you're calling there the perceptual catastrophe, the debris, all the stuff that gets built up. I'm going to read a little tiny quote, if you don't mind. Where is the bit? We're going to find it. You were writing about, it's here. So you were writing about the Kundabuffer. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a Gurdjieffian term. As something that causes human beings to perceive reality inverted, to value what has no value, to treat the imaginary as real and the real as irrelevant. And essentially this is, sort of referring to similar kinds of things that we would talk about in a therapy context as just these automated, you could say inherited. I mean, even when we talk about intergenerational trauma, if we're going to use that speak, you know, they might be products of very real things that happened in your own early life, but there is an inherited component to all of this. There is a passing down, however you want to think about that. And so I'm wondering, actually, Luke, if you could tell me a little bit more about the Kundabuffer, because I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
And just sort of, is what Gurdjieff is pointing to essentially that there is a way to go beneath all of that? Like that's essentially, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the Kundabuffer, it's two words that kind of Gurdjieff uses, and there's a whole story behind it, but I'll truncate it. So buffer in his terms is that we, over time, and particularly from childhood, our more essential self withdraws. Okay. And it's overgrown by this other thing, the personality, which most times is at complete odds with what is essential in us. And the only way to live normally and not go mad is to have a buffer between them, like on a train, a buffer, right? These things are installed for us. So we don't create them anyway. That's a whole stream of kind of conversation. And it's the only way that we can live a relatively insane life sanely because of the effects of Kundabuffer. The other part, Kunda, comes from the word Kundalini, which is that there is this organ that in our ancient past was grafted into our chemistry and eventually removed. But for various cosmic reasons, it made us see the reality upside down. And he talks about this in some very interesting ways, which I won't go into because it kind of goes down some rabbit holes. But the interesting part about this, and it very much ties into the biblical themes and everything else, but it's just the way that he talks about it, is that now we have two consciousnesses in us, which when he wrote about it was quite radical at the time. This is over 100 years ago, but now is kind of mainstream. But he has a particular view on it. So we have what's called our normal consciousnesses. So our waking sleep, as he calls it, which is very thin. The flimsiness of it is quite apparent, but it's the thing that we interface with. It's the lens, the user interface that we have with the world. And then there's what he calls the subconsciousness, which is our real consciousness, which we never see because we're blinded by all of these buffers. And so his work that he explains very clearly is simply to create a friction between our consciousness and our subconsciousness to begin to just start to remove or dissolve these buffers. And there are various ways, but the key way to do this, and maybe I'll give some history here, is that he talks about in the past that this was normally done through faith, love, and hope. These natural properties that we have in us that orient themselves towards something higher, God, intelligences, but have been so fundamentally contorted and pulled apart and rearranged that they don't mean what they mean anymore. And so for him, the last remaining kind of vestige of a gift that can help us is what becomes withdrawn in us in childhood, this essential self. And part of that essential self is what he calls objective conscience. And objective conscience for him is a pipeline, or let's just call it a pipeline, straight to God. And so his work was all about, over long periods of time, eventually coming into contact with this conscience of ours, which is buried, so that it becomes more active and begins to meet this surface consciousness. And then that by itself, this objective conscience in us, can then help us to navigate anything in life because it comes straight from God. And so we can rely upon it. And so these are kind of very sort of esoteric terms, but one of the ways he talks about this and what's important in one's own personal work is to have the ability to endure through remorse of conscience. Now, in our modern culture, that's not the done thing, because when you do suffer remorse, you suffer, right? You see something about yourself. May not be a bad thing, but it's something that's not compatible with the image you have of yourself.
Right.
So in one sense, his work is quite harsh, because it's not wanting to run away from the pain and the trauma of your own conscience, not what other people tell you is your trauma, but how do you come into contact with something that can see not only what is essential in you, but also see the fiction that we've created or has been created for us.
Hmm.
And so
That's
this is this
sorry.
gradual work. Sorry. And so
No,
that's
no,
just coming
yeah.
back to the Kundabuffer
Mm-hmm.
is in a nutshell, the lens that we perceive the world is the wrong lens.
Mm.
And so no matter what you do, no matter what type of work or spiritual journey that you're on, unless that is addressed first, then whatever you do after that is bound to end in tragedy. So his emphasis was very much on, okay, how do we begin to look at our own lens on the way that we perceive the world in a different way? And that's just incredibly difficult to do, because it really puts into question, what do you perceive? What is perception? Like it, and in a very practical way, not in a conceptual, the philosophical way,
Sure.
side with this, but really seeing it. And in my own experience, that can sometimes be very harsh. It can sometimes be very beautiful, but there's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of the debris field that we have in us that stops us from having this contact. So one of the first things that he asks is, this consciousness that you have, don't put too much stock in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Be a little skeptical on what your own mind is telling you.
Right.
And so then it begs the question of, okay, what can you rely upon in yourself, at least initially, to maybe reorient this perception? And for him, it's these sensations of the body, because your body is a true vehicle that, in a sense, can't lie to you, because all the energies and forces of the universe run through it. And if you can begin to perceive the energies of the body in a more clear way, then you have a data point for the reality of what's really happening, as opposed to what you imagine is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of, I'll be very, very brief. But see, so much of what you lay out there, Luke, and I'm sure you might hear this too, Nick, it can align with, there's so much of that can align with something like the ISTDP approach, right? So sort of like a foregrounding of internal conflict, going below first initial conscious, manifestations. The central dynamic sequence, the unconscious therapeutic alliance. Like there's a lot of, as you were talking there, Luke, that this is how a lot of the work can be done in an ISTDP approach as well. The confrontation with very buried pain and grief, and very deep kind of emotional pain, these sorts of things, that kind of suffering, if we call it. The bit that is different is that the explicit kind of mention that then opens up something like a pipeline to God, if we put it in those terms. That clears out, and this is, I used to talk about this as sort of authentic resonance. Like I was trying to find language to describe what is, like, because intuitively I knew it's in the body. We are clearing out debris that helps us to have contact, that our body can help us to know when we are in alignment with that thing, whatever it is. But it's different. It's different to just we're feeling emotions, but then what? Then what are we supposed to be aligning with to guide our actions? And this is the bit where we then sort of send people off and say, well, there you go. Things have been cleared out. And so I just thank you for explaining that, Luke. And that was really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reminded of, and even just with what you were just saying, like, I don't think the therapeutic world has had a label or sort of tributary for this stuff, as much. It may be alluded to. I think there's a book by Jonathan Lear called Therapeutic Action, and he talks about Freud's use of Eros as kind of an attempt at some of this, but who was, he couldn't be labeled as this, Christian Scientist, right? Or somebody that's using these terms. And and yet there is something about that is very, I think, draws our attention. Like, what did he mean by that? And like, yeah, where that gives some directionality to this. I think as you were talking, Luke, there is such a resonance for me thinking back to Aspacia, our presentation at IADTA. There is a way to even see these therapeutic, creations of, repression or the false self and the true self and all these things as very spiritual in nature and similar to this, that they are, you're pulling something away and putting it in a type of storage while you have to interface with this stuff. But this is the real thing that has the direct access. And in these fleeting moments, sometimes in therapy, sometimes in our relationships with other people, with nature, with whatever, like this comes out. And if you don't have a way to, dialogue with that again, like you miss it, or it's just a quick like, oh, that was weird. And I think the other thing that it struck me is how much with our the role of the present in this process, right? Like, yes, using our faculties to reflect on the goal and the past and things, but like in my own experience, the clearest moments of seeing those things don't exist, for a moment, right? It's very much in touch with here, with the energies, with whatever it is, and it feels. I would joke with one of my friends, post our deconstruction of Baptist Christianity, that like the closest thing I was like, when I like actually feel like I experience God, the closest thing I can give words to it is like, it just feels like I finally took the first real breath of the day. Like that there is just a sense of like, oh my God, yeah, I'm right here. Like I'm here. And everything else has just been like these shallow, or breath holds for the entire day. And I don't know. I don't know if that resonates, but that's something that I feel like as you're talking about him and his focus on the energies of the body in the present, you can't do that as well when you're in the future or in the past. And so much of, at least my own work with obsessive compulsive people is that's where they spend all their time. It's past crimes and future punishments. There's never a ton of contact in the present, and why I think sometimes psychoanalysis has really failed the obsessive person, because it's all about making meaning over your past, and they're pretty good at that. But there's very rarely this sort of, and where I think the ISTDP stuff gets closer, this moment of meeting with like, yeah, but like bracket that off for a moment, and what about like right here, right now with me? And it's like kind of taboo to do that in some of these circles, especially the analytic stuff. It's like, well, that's being too directive, and it's like, okay. And we had kind of touched on this last time, the role of, you're not free from that in either camp you go to. You can go to a really directive type of therapy or healer, and you're going to get put in some shoes, and, you're going to be wary of not making this person compliant with you or whatever. But that can also happen when you're just sitting there doing nothing. Like they can already think, oh, well, what's he hiding? What knowledge does he have that I don't have? Like you're not free from that in either camp. And so I think that, therapy becomes this very art. I do think it's a craft. I think it is type of art form where it's like, when is the right time to use these things? But yeah, I think that is initially what drew me to a lot of the experiential therapies, was its focus on the present, especially for the populations that I was working with, because that is the phobic thing, is to be in touch with what's here right now and what that could give me, what that channel of information might be able to provide, which gets into a lot of like curious things of, why am I so afraid of the present? Why am I, all of that stuff but those are, I think, just my free associations to kind of your riff there, Luke. That was really cool.
And look, and in my own experience, and this is kind of paramount, at least in what I've been involved with, is the guide, the therapist, is absolutely critical. This sense that I see of trying to remove oneself and be impartial is the biggest hindrance, because if the therapist is more present, it calls to the presence in others. So if you're there, really there, your client, your patient can also be there. There is an amplification of presence or being, which is an energy that moves from one person to another. And you can see it when you go on retreats. Everyone talks about the atmosphere. It is the atmosphere of presence. It is an energy that allows to reside when our energies are more collected rather than being dispersed. And that provides a potential, a reservoir with which people can automatically tap into to help with seeing, to help with whatever. So I completely reject the notion that you've just got a clipboard and you're sitting on a chair ticking a box. That's just absolute bullshit. No, the therapist is fundamentally important, and that's not to give a therapist more of a rock star type of status, but it is meant to be very humbling. The energies you exude, right? Even if you're not aware of it, have such an impact on the people that you're with. And I think that then allows a direction for your own inner work. I know it is for mine. When I meet with people, it's I want to be in a better state. I need to meet this person not as I normally am, which is being pulled apart by 20 million different things, but in a state that's helpful for me and helpful for them, because maybe something can arise from that's truly innovative that we both learn from. And that always brings an energy and what you were talking about earlier, that something is received and affirmed at the same time. It is a whole state, when you can induce those states in yourself where I'm open, and yet at the same time, something is affirming itself through me. It's me, but it's also not me. Nourishes in a completely different way, the Holy Spirit, right? And that pipeline to God is, as Gurdjieff called it, is literally the Holy Spirit coming from a very, very high place. It might express itself through us because we're the instruments of whatever that might need to be. But often what happens, and I've seen this in spiritual circles, is when those states or those energies come in, they're immediately grabbed and taken as oneself. And that goes straight to the ego and just reinforces everything about the former Kundabuffer that Gurdjieff talks about. So where does the results of my work go? Do I aggrandize myself and say, hey, I've done all these wonderful things and I must be pretty special? Or do I give thanks that something was allowed to come through me?
Right.
And now there's the question of, what do I need to do with that? And then that comes back to purpose. Okay. Am I just here to feel good? And these states feel very good, right? Like they're wonderful. But maybe that should be the trigger for, okay, there's something here in me that is of a higher quality. What do I do with it now? And that's on me. Right? Sorry to get all kind of preachery. I apologize.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's I think for me that's part of the undeniable. Well, that's one of the undeniable parts of all of this is that, and we've talked about this before, but those moments in a therapy context, I might be in position of therapist, right? Where that true sort of presence that we're talking about takes hold. To me, it is so obvious that is nothing to do with me. There's no effort required. It's just it's like a state shift, and that and yes, it can feel amazing, but it is very clear to me that something, like I said, something works through me, that something else is happening. And that's very alive to me in all of this. The other thing I just wanted to say briefly too was, I think part of potentially why we are also defended against being very present is that this kind of presence that we're talking about, especially once you're in an undefended state, which is really just a way to take you out of presence anyway, it's undeniable. There's something about the quality of it and with that, I think anyway, can come quite a weightiness, especially on reflection afterwards. Maybe like not in the moment, but once you realize that happened and what that, there's sort of a weightiness, a humility. It's like the remembering of something that is much harder for us to now sort of flip back into these other ways of deluding ourselves out of it. And so there is something about that weightiness of it that I think is part of what is terrifying or scary, to be terrifying. Don't know the right word. Because of precisely the reasons we're outlining here, because what am I supposed to do with that? And in the current world, people are often then going back out into the world where there is no community for this. There is no common way of talking about this. People in their families, their friend groups, their workplaces are not congregating around the shared idea of any of this. And it can be very isolating and alienating in that respect at the same time. And actually to the point that, people can humiliate them if they are to speak about things in this way. And so there is a very real pull towards going back to how things were. And I do see this as a real problem, that what do people do once they have these sorts of experiences and rememberings, when there is no place after that to go and sort of continue this work. And it needs to be more than just therapy, right? It needs to be like that's not the role of a therapist ultimately. That, well, I'll just keep going back to the therapist forevermore, and that'll be, like, what do people do with this, and how do we create community around it?
I think what came to my mind too was how ill-equipped we are from the beginning because of how we're communicating about these things. Our communities, like, they're just so impoverished in terms of, like, you had said go back to, when we have these moments of clear sight, you had said something like, how easy it is to go back, and I think going back sometimes looks like, Luke, what you had said of taking this as something I did, not as something flowing through me, right? And I think part of that is because we have such like low esteem and low ability to, because this has not maybe been taught to us from the get-go, that like you too are gods, like you have this weighty responsibility, and you are capable of holding that, and you need some help. But I don't think we have, like, all of the byproducts of this seem to me like to be or a lot of it to be a byproduct of not feeling competent enough in that we haven't helped people see that true value as like, no, this is something bestowed upon you, given to you as a gift, and it's been given to you because you have the capability to do it. Right? Not in a self-centered way, not in an egotistical way, but because like we need you to. And that would be such a radically different education, from the beginning than what we get in our, I think, not even just non-religious circles, but even in the religious circles that I've been a part of, that becomes this sort of, I don't know if this is speaking to my own upbringing, but like it's like a prideful thing to think you are that important. And that, I don't know, that's a hard line, right? Because we are saying this isn't just about you, and you're very, very important,
No.
So I don't know.
No, that speaks to me in the circles I've kept. There's this this concept of, kind of want and need, right?
Okay.
We are needed, in the biblical terms, the children of God become sons of God, right? In the Gurdjieffian sense, it's you are born because you are needed, right? Needed in the sense that there's a need which is based on something essential, rather than a want. I want this, I want that. I want to be famous, or I want to be rich, or those things are okay. But at the end of the day, they're wants and not needs.
Right.
And so for me, there's this question, and maybe coming back to the blog is, well, what's needed? Well, what's needed is the only thing I am absolutely sure of is that we are needed. There is something about being human that we can provide that no other creature can. Excuse me for a second.
Are you back?
Yes. Am I back? Okay, good. Sometimes the headphones.
I remember that one.
Thank you. And I also see this too. There is a bit of the stigma, particularly in Christian circles, and even in kind of Gurdjieffian circles. How dare we say that we're needed, because that would imply some kind of egotistical value. But you exist, right? Therefore, you are needed. The work is to find out, well, why. And this comes back to purpose. It's what does it mean to be human? And so first of all, I need to understand how I work. Literally how energies and forces move through me. And the body is the initial place to start, because I can rely upon it. And it is the field of action. And when I say the body, I'm not talking about the physical body, because that's not our body. It's the perception of the energies of the body, which becomes the organizing factor, if you like, for everything else. So for me, what's needed, why am I needed, becomes something very live and very empowering, because it very much has a cosmic need about it. I'm not here just to serve the needs of my family or my community or anything else. I'm actually here potentially to serve something of a much higher quality. And while that might be far away from me now, I need to find others who are also searching for the same thing. And in sense that builds the community, like it's like minds, there's this very interesting sense, and I've seen this so many times where I'll have a question and I'll just come across folk who have a similar question, and we can engage. A la this very example. Now, who knows how that comes about? I didn't plan it. Right. It happened for us.
Is that, in your circles or in your experience, is that view, it seems like right there, because you can be a part of, again, very Christian or even other religious circles that have that idea, right? But the foundational, and I'm aware that this is not the what I was raised in is not broad Christianity. I think it's similar for a lot of Western Christianity, but that foundational worldview seems so incompatible with then this idea of the morality and you're here to accept this because, fallen humanity and you need to be punished and this person took on the punishment for you. It's it's a very Jekyll and Hyde God figure, if you will, that you're then trying to relate to, or do I even want to, why would I want to be with somebody that needs all this, stuff to happen in order for me to be present, right? So they feel at some level so fundamentally incompatible that I think even that's why so much of people who were raised Christian in these particular, don't find it very transformative.
Yeah.
Because it's not doing what I think it was intended to do.
Yeah. Well, and that, a moral framework very quickly turns into a legal one. Well, it's the basis of our whole kind of legislative kind of world. And so to reframe this, and this is certainly what Gurdjieff did and others, is that if you put it on that kind of foundation, a legalistic or a moral one, it eventually goes down a rabbit hole, right? And ends up breeding unintended consequences. This was the whole Mosaic law, and what Christ did was, guys, you're trying to follow all the rules, which is then inevitably leading you to a place which goes completely against the intent. So one needs to reset this a little.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea, and I think this is what I'm trying to do, exploring kind of Gurdjieff and mental health and everything else, is how can, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, it's just coming back to this and going, okay, let's put this in question again. Let's put this whole Christ thing or Gurdjieff thing or health thing or the therapy thing, just what are we trying to do? What are we trying to work with? And for me, because you're more on sort of neutral ground that everybody can relate to, is the energies and forces of the body, because we all have one. And so when we talk about states, Gurdjieff goes into quite some depth about states, feelings, thoughts, sensations. He has a whole classification, if you'd like, though he wouldn't call it that just helps one to find a place for those things, because both in the patristic fathers as well as certainly Gurdjieff, all of that is mixed in us. And so we often confuse sensations for feelings, feelings for emotions, states for something else. And for him, it's like, no, there's a science of being around this that's universal, that can help us just to understand what truly are we working with. That the morals that we call kind of morals are an energetic expression of something within us and that moves within us. Like with the forgiveness thing, what is really sin? That very much has this sort of legalistic-y, kind of sense, but really sin is, it's kind of missing the mark. It's taking you away from something that's more whole. Right. And how can that wholeness then serve something else? So for Gurdjieff, and I think all of the esoteric sciences, it's always about, there is something in me that serves multiple functions. And if I can begin to see that I serve rather than become a slave. So the only difference between a servant and a slave is one is conscious of what they're doing and the other one is not. In fact, they're actively resisting. And so that's for him, and it goes through a whole bunch of things, but it does change things on need and service rather than how is this going to benefit me? And I found in the circles, and it takes some time to kind of get there, but that then becomes the glue for everything else, because you're more willing to endure the frictions. You're more willing to do the pain and the suffering, both of what you see in yourself and others, because it's in service of something else. It's, I need to see and work here because there's something needed of me. I may not know what that is, but I need to move towards that, and I need help to do that. I can't do it on my own.
Yeah, that was, I think, the thing that struck me, is so much more implicitly communal and relational. Just from that viewpoint, is there's so much more reliance on that. I need all of these other people to help me with this, and you need me to help you with your project. And, that there's, again, that's another thing that I think in the West is very split apart. It's all about this sort of individual pursuit of something. And, not surprisingly, I think that is the image that the primary Western image of Jesus, right, was Jesus resurrecting alone by himself versus the Eastern Church was always with all of humanity, you know. And that, I think, yeah, there's something about the relational aspect of what you're pointing to.
Yeah, it's part of what I picked up on too, as really standing out when I read that blog post, is the move to the relationality of it all. Really struck home in a much deeper sense than, people are talking about it all over the place online and things, but this just felt more deeply grounded in something. And I think about, again, even those courses of therapy where something transformative happens. Really, they speak to that too. Like and it's often a shared sense between both of us in the room, that something happened here that's sort of beyond both of us, but we sort of did together, but something else too. And there is that shared sense. And I think this trap around pride and is a really tricky one, and it is a really fine line. I think it was Daniel Garner that pointed me once to the virtue of magnanimity, and how that can be sort of a different way of looking at what we might sort of talk about more as pride. That it has the sort of communal component to it. It is the recognition. The way I kind of think about it anyway is there is a manner in which we are taking the human being very seriously. There is like a reverence for what it is to be human, and that means that that's each of us, right? And that would include ourselves. So there is and I think this gets mixed up for some people around the idea that we're being prideful, or to take oneself too seriously, or to consider one's role too seriously, or something about that can get mixed up in all of this. And the way that narcissism is thrown around all the time now as well, I think kind of points to this too. It can be a real, an attempt to sort of humiliate someone out of a position sometimes, of some of what we're talking about here, kind of starting to connect into some of all this and realizing what we are each, all of us, capable of, but capable of in the sense that capable of allowing to work through us, So again, it's recognizing what a human being is and taking that seriously is not the same thing as saying that it is somehow all just us. And that, that speaks to this sort of pipeline to God, or however we want to think about it, but also that we need one another, that we need one another as human beings, in order to use that pipeline to God, or in order to allow that to work through us in a way that is, I think the way you talk about it in the blog post, Luke, is around cosmic architecture and cosmic purpose, and these larger senses of purpose that are beyond the individual. And I think it's harder and harder to get away from that. At least it has been for me, the more that I engage deeply in the therapeutic process, on both sides of that equation. And I think my childhood wasn't overly steeped in religion in any deep sense, outside of, going to beautiful churches sometimes, and, but being able to kind of, I think that actually kind of in a roundabout way freed me up to just be able to sort of be in the mystery and wonder of it all and the beauty of it all. Obviously it would have been nice to have had a bit more instruction around it than just that. But, there is something to it that when I hear other people talk about having much more of a Christian upbringing, and a lot of the sort of undoing around some of that also is required. There is something about the openness of that field, if you will, when I was younger, that I am thankful for, even though it also left its own kinds of holes and problems. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird experience to also be kind of thankful for the other too, and that wouldn't have been my response at other points in life, but being like, to have had to go through that journey of beating your way out of these, box that you're put in with some of the more conservative dogmatic stuff, like that has been so fruitful. It's been terrible at times, but it's also been so fruitful. Yeah, and I was reminded when both of you were talking of earlier, I think, Luke, when you had said, there's something that allows our presence as a healer, a therapist, whatever we're doing, that is communicated if we are taking that role seriously to the other person, even implicitly, without words. And yeah, that like, whoa, there's some recognition when I engage with somebody who is in a more grounded, connected space that is like, I want that, like that's different. There's something here that feels just qualitatively different. And I'm more, I think it does happen both ways. Searles had wrote a paper about the patient's need to be a therapist to their analyst. That sometimes this is a, really longed for thing. And when you get kind of deep enough in the work with somebody, that they want to see that they're also having an effect on you. And I think that is also getting at this, that like, yeah, we're in certain roles by the nature of the profession or whatever, but like that's getting at this idea that there's an exchange that's happening that's not just unilateral. And I've certainly felt that with certain patients where it's like, wow, like this is, who's qualified to be in this position right now? Like it feels a little strange.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's just all that to say, like there's, such a beautiful cosmology that paints, that like you are profoundly needed, and so are you, and so are you, and for each other to do this project. And yeah, got me wanting to read Gurdjieff now, man.
Well, look, he's a bit of a strange character. He's one of the, you either love him or you hate him.
We like those.
But he was, coming back to some points, made earlier. He was, many people accused him being an out and out kind of egoist, right? And he used to talk about pride, big P pride and little p pride. And he was certainly not of the ilk to be a doormat Christian or anything like that. It's that if we do take our purpose as we should, then absolutely we should be striving for something greater. Not in the normal sense that we have, but he talks about the need for masters and slaves now, which maybe in our times might sound a little bit odd, but he doesn't talk about masters and slaves in the sense of those who have power and money over those who don't. But to acknowledge now that those that have a thirst for being, as he calls it, this thirst and the opportunity and the support in order to take this journey to its fullest extent, need to do it. Need to do it. Because our normal way that we live is in a life of being essentially a slave. That is, all these things happen to us. We don't know why. We react. We have habits. We're quite mechanical. And very rarely do we reflect or have the opportunity to work in a different way. And so it's really kind of beholden that those who do feel this and have the opportunity and support to do it absolutely must. If they don't, you're essentially putting your finger up at God. No. He's giving you the opportunity, but in our culture, it's like someone who's seen as that is seen as, being a little bit mad. Where in ancient cultures, it was revered, someone who was on a quest, the ancient quests and everything else. It was like, wow, there's something they need to do in this life. I'm not in touch with that, but at least there's a reverence to it. And so there's this sense here of really taking that role and that purpose absolutely as seriously as we possibly can. And
Right.
and I also feel it too, when people do take this question seriously, the question sort of sits around us and enlivens something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you change, I change.
Right.
So there's a lot that's kind of going on. But for me, like Christ, Gurdjieff's greatest teaching was his life, not what he wrote or the exercises or the dances that he brought, but the way that he lived.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, there's such a like paradoxical feeling to that of like there's so much shrinks and so much gets a lot bigger, and yeah, so much feels way more simpler in that type of framework and a lot more complex. And yeah, I think that is, it takes a lot of courage, strength to hold that level of complexity, and the how to approach that with this understanding that some people have got that zest and have been blessed by that, and some people might not, right? Without that even becoming a private project for who's superior or inferior, is hard, and also is isolating if you feel like you are one of those people, right? Can be very isolating, can be very yeah, you don't have it. That's why things like this I feel like are so important to me, and because when you find those people, you got to hold on to them, and there is yeah a resonance, a longing for people with big vision,
Oh. And a lot of risks that need to be taken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a dangerous, very dangerous journey, filled with risk and hazard. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in the business, in the innovation game, which there's lots of risks and things, but you take on those risks in a calculated, mature way, of course. But nonetheless, it's kind of boom or bust, right?
Yeah.
And kind of Gurdjieff was very much like that. Was kind of, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, or I don't even try. And so we're in this culture of we need to be safe, and safe in the little s, not the big S. For me, safe, the little s, is more equivalent to comfort. I don't really want to feel anything. Big S is I'm allowed to fail, and fail badly, and fall on my ass and get hurt, and it's okay, right? Because there's people around me that have been there, done that. And so that's the big S, not comfort. It's, you got to sometimes hit your face so you know you got one.
Here's a question this sparks is, do you think if this worldview, or not just Gurdjieff, but what we're talking about, this idea, if that were more commonplace, would that translate to more and more people who have that zest? Would it be less outliers of
Because, and Gurdjieff speaks about this, and many other kind of religions, it's the whole point of spreading a religion, that the more of it is in you, the more of it can be in me. Right? It's like we can infect each other in a good way, but it very much comes down towards, if you've got that energy, that question, and you've gone through the ringer and experienced a great deal, that by itself imparts something on me that I can't give to myself.
Right.
And that helps me because it touches something in me that's already been touched in you. So Gurdjieff talked about if there were 200 people who were kind of developed in the way that both Christ and him saw, it would stop all wars.
Yeah.
That there's something of, and he's got some special words for this, but the more you work, it helps me work because of the relational energy that it invokes. And that kind of doesn't really matter about space or time. And I've verified this for myself. You know, we're having this conversation, right? Which I really kind of beg, I don't think is a conversation. There is something else happening because we just kind of pixels and audio files. There's nothing real being exchanged between us, and yet I feel it. It's not a mental thing, that I know for sure. There is something that is able to exchange across time and space that we really is a mystery, but yet all of the scriptures talk about it, and Gurdjieff talks a great deal about it. Hence why for him, a distributed network of small groups of people working in a concerted way helps the entire planet. Hence why it's incumbent upon those who can, must. No ifs, no buts. That's the courage, the bravery, which then helps something. And particularly in a culture that wants to homogenize everything and reduce everybody to a thing that's just socially compliant and pay your taxes and vote the right way. All that just needs to be parked. Not forgotten, not attended to, that, you know, you're still going to pay bills, but it's what question sits in you and lives in you.
Yeah, something about too, the more, I guess when I am following more of the, that sort of courageous path, if we call it that, which might seem like, the crazy thing to people around me, and not the easiest things, and sometimes even for myself, not really things I can understand rationally. But when I'm following along that stream, that is too when it's more alive to me, these sort of synchronicities that we're talking about now too. Like I really do, and I don't know if this is for everyone, but there is something about it. There are experiences as you do that for me at least help to remind me that I'm not alone in it. I don't know how else to put it. Whereas, and that is truly helpful to the whole endeavor because it's not easy. Versus when, I'm just more in, you know, the sort of just trying to live out my week, my month, whatever, just in a kind of more, we could call it easeful, but a much more flattened, kind of simplified, just fitting in with how everything is running around me kind of way of being. That there's less of that's apparent. So there's something, I don't really know how to put this into words, there's just something about it too that really fits into this whole, when I do start to try and operate more in that way or from that place, there are these experiences that help to remind me of something greater than me, and I feel that and I experience it as a nourishment, even though at the same time it might be, you know, I might be curled up in a fetal position and, you know, and in some sort of emotional agony, versus that there's sort of a boredom and a mundanity almost too, the going to the simplified. But I get it because it's who wants to be curled up in a ball sobbing, you know, all the time, you know, I understand. but I do think that there's something to that, because people talk a lot now about boredom, and there is a real problem of people being bored, and things are mundane and looking for quick hits of excitement and these kinds of energy that can lead us even more astray. But there is something to once we can be, and I guess this is probably part of the work of clearing some blockages out, being able to feel that kind of those sort of reminders work through you, or be attuned to them, that I think is so important to all of this as well. There is this kind of, even though there are not a lot of people in my life, especially not in close proximity to me, there are you wonderful people, but not actually physically around me, who might think this way, or sort of experience life in this manner. I have the zest, like you're talking about, Nick. Despite that, there is still some kind of community or something that I feel in those reminders, or something. There is this kind of way that I still feel held by this other thing, this greater force, this whatever we call it, God, or whatever we call it, that I think is still apparent, that is nourishing, even though, of course, it would be lovely to have an actual community of human beings as well who are in it, around me physically. Yeah, that has been, I think, tuning more into that as well has been really helpful for me, and amongst kind of the sometimes more the loneliness of it. And as I do that, I'm also just more and more surprised by the people around me. And maybe this speaks to, Luke, what you were saying, the more that I sort of tune into that, there does seem to be some impact somewhere on some energetic level that is not, it opens up the people around me to me in some new way as well. And there is something there is something that starts to shift. I have experienced that, and I'm still experiencing that. So I thought I would share that. Yeah.
My mentor had said something to me the other day of like, just with the amount of things going on and shifts taking place, and just it feels like all different areas in my life, the same themes, lessons, whatever is coming up. And he was like, yeah, if we're lucky, it happens everywhere all at once, and you get to see it on full display. And that is more cause for this sense of, holy shit, I have been so blind, or I have, which is painful, which sucks, which is like, and maybe that's another reason, like we haven't equipped people to mourn that, or to realize the remorse, like you were saying earlier, that like I have been super blind, and there's been all of these reminders this whole time that I'm here for some reason, and I have ignored that. Like that's a shitty thing to realize. It is so painful, and is way easier to just be like, well, whatever, and go on being. But yeah, I think that I'm more and more, through all the chaos and through all the shitstorm of daily life that goes on, it's pretty apparent to me how present all of this is, in all of the little circles I'm a part of, in its own way. So yeah, humbling for sure.
And it's interesting now that, the state of kind of globalized chaos, we have a technology that can connect us and find people we would never normally find. And there is an energetic transmission that goes, absolutely convinced of that. How it works and all of the threads and everything else is another mystery. But yet it's there because it enables something. And there is often, God, am I alone in all of this? Because everyone around me seems to think I'm an absolute friggin' cuckoo. And it's it's like, oh, why don't you just kind of concentrate on the career and this, and I just don't give a shit, right? Not that it's not important, right? You need these things in life, and it's wonderful material for one's work. But there is a point where you can't turn back. It's just the way it is. So there's a choice there. Do I now endure whatever has to be endured and find what I need and the reminders and all of those things, but also to be very clear as much as I possibly can with all of these questions about the road less traveled, you know, and in a strange way that gap, which I think is trying to be filled by all the online conversations and religion and everything else, we've kind of come full circle. Where if you look at the early church, or really early kind of religion, it was small groups of distributed people trying to find their way with something. And now we're kind of returning back just at a global scale, but it's still small groups of people trying to find their way with something.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying something earlier, Luke, about, well, I think we were talking about all of us sort of the therapy room, like one-on-one. So say two people, two human beings. And that, obviously the work of the therapist as well, that they are, what is going on with their pipeline, and their sort of clarity and removal of rubble and all these things, and how is that playing out when they are also in that particular role. And we were talking about how I think, and one way I think about it is there's like a potentiation that if say the therapist has a clearer pipeline and is able to be present, and the client or the patient is, that something about having the two people there sort of potentiates what is available. Or I know this isn't the Gurdjieff language or anything. This is just coming to mind now. But then I was also struck by, I remember that you were talking once, Luke, about how Gurdjieff originally does like sort of more group work, small group work. Is there something in the idea that a small group, and Gurdjieff's thinking at least, that a small group works better for this because there are more human beings there doing the potentiating, if we put it into that crude language of mine, versus say like a one-on-one? Or what has your experience of that been?
Both. One can give a greater quantity of energy, which is normally in large groups. The other one can give the same but at a different scale. So what's possible in a large group is just not possible with a one-on-one, right? And vice versa. But at the end of the day, whoever is engaged in that, the quality of their own being, their own presence, and more importantly, the earnestness to engage in their own personal work, I'll just call it that, is absolutely paramount. Otherwise, what ends up happening, you get into the teacher mode, whereby you begin to be less aware of what's needed for the other, because you're now just wanting to spew out instructions, right? But if you're in question, and you're trying to connect with something more essential, that by itself helps.
Yeah.
I've been in, groups and kind of meetings where not a word has been said, but wow, it's been the best meeting I've ever had.
Yeah.
Because there's been something that's just been allowed to come in, to be invoked, not through words, but through an active inner work. And so there's always something wanting to come in. That's my experience. It's not like you have to invite it. It wants to come in if you allow it. And so this is where I feel it becomes, so important that if I'm on my journey, that's going to help everyone on theirs, and vice versa. As soon as I stop and go, right, I'm the teacher or the therapist, or that doesn't mean you don't have a job to do in kind of guidance. But I have found if I'm more connected with my own work, my own questions, and my own inner state, it allows me to be far more in tune with what's happening in the moment, and then I don't have to rely upon myself to come up with anything. It's revealed. And I don't know whether you've had that experience with patients. It's just like something comes from nowhere that says, try this or say this.
Yeah.
And you can be more reliant upon that, because I don't know what it's like for you, but my words are always clumsy and never hit the mark. And I feel like so unqualified to say or do anything. But yet if I can rely upon this other thing, it always finds the right words.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Well, your blog posts are just incredible testament to that. So I know you speak about them as, the sort of something working through.
Yeah, and that capacity is there for every human.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right? Sometimes, we reduce it to its intuition. Well,
Yeah.
what the hell does that mean? Right? There is something coming through you.
Yes.
That you're just not conscious of, but knows the way. Right? Mm-hmm. And it's like somehow we kind of downplay that into, oh, well, it's not very rational. But yet, if you look at most of what you do in life, it's governed not by rationality. It's governed by a feel, a sense. When someone walks in the room, they're having a bad day, right? You just know.
Yeah. Right. Stay away from those guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wall up.
Yeah. In military terms, it's being able to think with your gut, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know all about this. It's the white elephant in the room.
Mm.
Gurdjieff, and certainly Christ, just takes it to its absolute extent, right? Which is, I know we're not supposed to use the word God. We can use other things, but for me, that is the category with which this fits into, that this comes from a deeper or a higher place, and it's not from me. That I know, right? So then begs this other question, where the hell does that come from? And how can I follow that back? Because it came to me, maybe I can return to it. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that there are other places from which things come, even if we just use that as a starting point, I think the writing is actually a really great example of that, because that's something I've done since I was just little, like very, very young, as far back as I can remember. And that kind of writing that I do is just a picking up of a pen, and it just goes. There's no thinking. I can do the kind of writing where there's thinking, and that's usually much worse. That's because it's a different thing. But I think that is part of it for me, is I've always, and it can sound a bit trite to say that, the writing doesn't come from me, because I know people talk about writing that way. But when you experience that, that to me is much more undeniable sometimes than is something like a gut instinct, which you can, because there is kind of it could kind of be all sorts of things, and maybe it's just, confirmation bias, and maybe it's this and that. But when there are actual words flowing out of my pen that are going faster than I can even think, and then when I read them back, it's like a tapestry. It's like, I don't know what, and it's also, there's something in it that I didn't know 1 minute before, and now I read it, and that to me is also just really undeniable. That's a bit of an aside, but I do think that thinking about ways that for different people that might be listening, or that they can kind of link this to their own experience of things. That is another way that I think it can happen to people. But what you were talking there about earnestness, that's sort of what we might talk about as will, kind of in the form of therapy, that we, someone's will to undertake this work, and someone's will to, go through the challenging stuff, essentially. Right. Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
Because I'm aware that we're getting close to time, I just want to read. Can I read one more little bit of your blog post, Luke?
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's so lovely. You put the creation is waiting. It is waiting because it is currently malfunctioning, because the administrative layer that should be governing it with wisdom and love is compromised, corrupted, or absent. And the only thing that can restore it is the emergence of genuinely transformed human beings who can fill the vacancy, because the creation is groaning for what you might become. I feel that. I feel that. Yeah, the creation is groaning.
Yeah, it's almost, that's one of these strange experiences of suffering, remorse of conscience, is having something inside oneself that's groaning out for you to become something that's needed. And it's a harrowing, terrifying experience. And yet at the same time, it's, wow, it just opens up something. It's not just some poor little human on some blue planet stuck in some bloody galaxy that no one cares about. I'm not just molecules. I'm needed for something. And the cosmos is crying out for it.
It's not oppressive. It's not oppressive. That's the distinction, the qualitative distinction. There's something to it that's an opening. But you see, that can be just as terrifying, if not more.
Yeah, to be loved is really, really terrifying.
So much more unknown associated with being opened up than closed down.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the sense that this is like only I can do this.
Yes.
For me, take that up. Harrowing's a good word.
It's a great word. This has been magnificent. Thank you. Thank you both.
That's so fun.